They only come back when you forget what they did. This truth cuts through the comfortable illusions we maintain about human nature, revealing one of the most predatory patterns in human relationships: the calculated return of those who have harmed us, timed precisely for the moment when our memory of their damage has faded enough to lower our defenses. I have observed this pattern across every form of human interaction, from intimate relationships to professional environments, from family dynamics to political movements. The same individuals who caused pain, betrayal, and destruction inevitably reappear when they sense that time has softened the sharp edges of memory, when forgiveness has been mistaken for forgetfulness, when healing has been confused with amnesia. This is not coincidence, but strategy. Those who specialize in exploiting others develop sophisticated radar for detecting when their former victims have become vulnerable again, when the protective barriers built from bitter experience have eroded through the natural human tendency to forget pain and remember only the edited highlights of past relationships. The psychology behind this pattern reveals uncomfortable truths about both predators and their targets. Predators never truly change, they only become more patient and strategic, while their victims' capacity for healing often becomes their greatest vulnerability, when that healing includes forgetting the very lessons that pain was meant to teach. Today, I speak of this cycle that traps the generous-hearted and the forgiving, and how remembering becomes not bitterness but wisdom, not grudge-holding but self-protection. The return of those who have harmed you is never random. It follows predictable patterns, based on their assessment of your psychological state and defensive posture. These individuals possess an almost supernatural ability to sense when your anger has cooled, when your boundaries have relaxed, when your natural human tendency toward forgiveness has created openings they can exploit once again. The timing of their return is strategic, often coinciding with moments when you are emotionally vulnerable, professionally successful, or personally content. They return when you've achieved something they want access to, when you're going through changes that might make you more susceptible to manipulation, or when enough time has passed that social memory of their previous behavior has faded. Their approach is rarely direct confrontation of past wrongs. Instead, they employ what might be called selective amnesia, acting as if the harmful events never occurred or were somehow misunderstood. They present themselves as evolved, changed, or reformed, offering explanations that shift responsibility while never quite acknowledging the full scope of damage they caused. The sophistication of this approach lies in its exploitation of your own psychological healing processes. Healthy people naturally process and integrate painful experiences, eventually reducing the emotional charge associated with traumatic memories. This healing, which should be celebrated, becomes vulnerability when it includes forgetting the practical lessons that pain was meant to teach about certain people's unchanging nature. They often return bearing gifts, apologies that sound sincere, opportunities that seem valuable, or information that appears helpful. These offerings serve as psychological Trojan horses, designed to bypass your rational defenses by appealing to your desire for closure, your hope for redemption, or your practical needs in current circumstances. The most insidious aspect of calculated return is how it leverages your own growth against you, your increased capacity for compassion, your developed skills in conflict resolution, your enhanced emotional intelligence. All of these positive changes can be weaponized by those who understand that evolved people want to believe in others' capacity for change, even when evidence suggests otherwise. The human mind's tendency to forget painful experiences serves crucial survival functions, but this same protective mechanism can become a vulnerability when dealing with individuals who specialize in causing predictable patterns of harm. Understanding why we forget and what we lose when memory fades becomes essential for maintaining appropriate defenses. Psychological research reveals that traumatic memories often become suppressed or distorted as a natural protective mechanism. The brain's attempt to shield us from overwhelming emotional pain can result in the very amnesia that predators rely upon for their successful return. What begins as psychological self-care can evolve into strategic disadvantage if we lose access to the hard-won wisdom that difficult experiences provided. The forgetting process is not uniform. We tend to retain emotional impressions while losing specific details about behaviors, patterns, and consequences. This selective memory creates particular vulnerability because we may remember that someone was difficult while forgetting exactly how their difficulty manifested, what damage it caused, or why we originally decided to distance ourselves from them. Time itself becomes an accomplice in this forgetting process. The sharp edges of painful memories naturally dull, emotional wounds heal, and the intensity of past experiences fades into general impressions. This temporal distance, while necessary for psychological health, can also erase the visceral understanding of someone's capacity for harm that originally motivated protective measures. Social pressure accelerates this forgetting through cultural narratives that valorize forgiveness, second chances, and the belief that people can change. While these values serve important functions in healthy relationships, they can become liabilities when applied indiscriminately to individuals whose patterns of behavior suggest fundamental character issues rather than temporary lapses in judgment. The forgetting process is often encouraged by the harmful individuals themselves through what psychologists call gaslighting, the systematic undermining of your memory and perception of events. They may claim that past incidents were misunderstandings, that you were overly sensitive, or that circumstances have changed in ways that make previous patterns irrelevant. This external pressure to forget combines with internal healing processes to create comprehensive amnesia about real dangers. Perhaps most problematically, the natural human tendency toward emotional regulation can lead to minimizing past harm in order to maintain psychological equilibrium. We may unconsciously edit our memories to reduce cognitive dissonance, telling ourselves that situations weren't as bad as they seemed, or that we somehow contributed to problems that were actually imposed upon us by others' choices. Those who specialize in exploiting others develop sophisticated skills in reading psychological states and timing their approaches for maximum effectiveness. They understand that direct confrontation when defenses are high leads to failure, so they cultivate patience and wait for optimal conditions to present opportunities for renewed access. This patience is not evidence of personal growth or reformed character. It is strategic calculation designed to maximize the chances of successful manipulation. Like predators in nature who wait for prey to become separated from protective groups or distracted by other concerns, human predators monitor their former targets for signs of vulnerability, success, or changed circumstances that might create openings. They often maintain peripheral awareness of your life through social media monitoring, mutual connections, or other surveillance methods that allow them to track your emotional state, relationship status, professional progress, and personal circumstances. This information gathering enables them to time their approach for moments when you might be most receptive to renewed contact. The return often coincides with your achievements or positive life changes, new relationships, career advancement, personal milestones, or recovered health. This timing exploits the psychological openness that accompanies success and the natural human desire to share good fortune with others, even those who have previously caused harm. Your happiness becomes the signal they were waiting for. Crisis timing is equally strategic. They may return during periods of loss, transition, or uncertainty, when your normal support systems are strained and your psychological defenses are focused elsewhere. Divorce, death of loved ones, job changes, health challenges, or family crises create opportunities for those who specialize in exploiting vulnerability. The approach itself is calibrated to match your current psychological state. If you've become more spiritual, they present themselves as having found religion. If you've focused on personal growth, they claim to have done similar work on themselves. If you've achieved professional success, they approach as potential collaborators or supporters. The presentation is always designed to resonate with your current values and interests. Perhaps most insidiously, they often return with apparent humility, acknowledging past mistakes while subtly reframing them in ways that minimize their responsibility or the impact on you. This pseudo-accountability serves multiple functions. It appears to address your need for recognition of harm while actually avoiding full responsibility, and it positions them as reformed individuals worthy of renewed trust. The pattern of return, renewed trust, and repeated harm creates cycles that can persist for years or decades, if not consciously interrupted. Each iteration typically involves escalating manipulation, as the predator tests boundaries and establishes what level of behavior you will accept, often pushing further than previous episodes, because they've learned from earlier experiences. The renewed relationship rarely picks up where the previous one ended. Instead, it often begins with a honeymoon period, designed to override your memory of past problems. During this phase, behavior may be exemplary, promises abundant, and attention focused intensely on your needs and preferences. This positive reinforcement is strategically deployed to create new positive associations that compete with negative memories. However, the fundamental character patterns that created original problems remain unchanged. What changes is the sophistication of presentation and the depth of knowledge about your psychological vulnerabilities gained through previous interactions. They know your triggers, your desires, your fears, and your weak points in ways that new people in your life do not, giving them significant advantages in manipulation. The deterioration typically follows predictable stages: testing boundaries through minor violations, escalating demands or expectations, withdrawal of the positive reinforcement that characterized the reunion, and eventual return to patterns that necessitated the original separation. However, each time the cycle repeats, your capacity to recognize these patterns may be diminished by the accumulated psychological impact of repeated betrayal. The cycle creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, a state where repeated negative experiences with the same individual lead to passive acceptance of harmful treatment and decreased confidence in your ability to accurately assess character or protect your own interests. This psychological conditioning makes each subsequent return more likely to succeed and more difficult to resist. Breaking the cycle requires conscious effort to maintain accurate memory of past experiences, clear documentation of patterns, rather than relying on general impressions, and commitment to letting protective memories inform future decisions, rather than allowing natural healing processes to erase hard-won wisdom about certain individuals' unchanging nature. The most challenging aspect of breaking this cycle is often social pressure from others who haven't experienced the full pattern, who see only the current positive presentation, and who interpret your resistance to reconciliation as vindictiveness rather than wisdom. This external minimization of your experience can undermine your confidence in your own perceptions and memories. Developing the ability to remember harmful patterns without being consumed by bitterness requires sophisticated emotional and psychological skills. This protective remembering involves maintaining accurate records of behavior patterns while processing emotional wounds in ways that don't compromise your ability to recognize similar patterns in the future. The practice begins with creating external memory aids that don't depend on emotional recall, written records of specific incidents, documented patterns of behavior, and clear articulation of the reasons that originally motivated distance or separation. These records serve as reality checks when natural forgetting processes or sophisticated manipulation attempts threaten to undermine your protective awareness. Distinguishing between emotional healing and tactical amnesia becomes crucial for this process. Healing involves processing the emotional impact of harmful experiences so they no longer control your daily emotional state, while maintaining access to the practical lessons those experiences taught about certain individuals' character and behavioral patterns. You can forgive someone while still remembering exactly why forgiveness was necessary. Protective remembering also involves developing pattern recognition skills that allow you to identify similar behavioral clusters in new relationships before significant harm occurs. The lessons learned from one harmful individual often apply to others who employ similar strategies, making your difficult experiences valuable not just for protecting against specific repeat offenders, but for general relationship safety. The art requires learning to trust your own memory and perceptions, despite external pressure to minimize past experiences or doubt your own recall. Those who have harmed you often return with support from mutual acquaintances who haven't witnessed their harmful behavior or who have been subjected to carefully crafted alternative narratives about past events. Practicing what might be called conditional openness allows you to remain receptive to genuine change while maintaining appropriate protection against repeated harm. This involves establishing clear behavioral criteria that must be met consistently over extended periods before trust can be rebuilt, rather than accepting immediate promises or short-term behavioral improvements as evidence of fundamental character change. Perhaps most importantly, protective remembering involves accepting that some people do not change in meaningful ways, and that your capacity for growth, forgiveness, and second chances should not be confused with naivety about others' unchanging patterns. Your evolution as a person can coexist with realistic assessment of others' limitations and consistent character traits. The path I walked taught me that memory is not the enemy of forgiveness, but its necessary companion. True forgiveness requires accurate understanding of what is being forgiven, while protective wisdom demands clear recollection of patterns that might repeat if appropriate boundaries are not maintained. I learned that those who caused me the deepest harm possessed an almost supernatural ability to sense when my natural healing processes had created vulnerabilities they could exploit. Their returns were never coincidental, but carefully timed to coincide with moments when success, happiness, or personal growth had softened the protective barriers that pain had originally taught me to construct. The most difficult lesson was accepting that my capacity for forgiveness, growth, and belief in others' potential for change, qualities I valued most about myself, could become weapons in the hands of those who understood how to exploit generosity, hope, and the human desire for redemption and closure. Your modern world has amplified both the opportunities for harmful people to monitor your emotional state and the cultural pressure to embrace forgiveness without wisdom. Social media provides unprecedented access to information about your psychological condition, while therapeutic and spiritual communities often promote ideals of unconditional forgiveness that ignore practical considerations about pattern recognition and self-protection. But the ancient wisdom remains true. Those who have shown you who they are through consistent patterns of harmful behavior are telling you something important about their character, and your failure to remember these lessons serves neither your well-being nor their genuine development. Protective memory is not grudge holding, but wisdom preservation. The cycle can only be broken through conscious choice, to let protective memories inform future decisions. This means creating external records of behavioral patterns that don't depend on emotional recall, maintaining clear boundaries based on demonstrated character rather than promised change, and accepting that some people's return to your life would inevitably recreate the conditions that originally necessitated their removal. Remember that your healing, growth, and emotional evolution are precious achievements that deserve protection from those who would exploit them. Your increased capacity for compassion should enhance your ability to discern who deserves that compassion, rather than eliminating your standards for how you allow others to treat you. When someone from your past approaches with promises of change, apologies for previous harm, or opportunities for renewed relationship, let your response be informed by patterns rather than presentations, by documented history rather than current claims, by protective memory rather than wishful amnesia. They return when you forget what they did, because forgetting signals that your defenses are down, that lessons have been lost, that protective wisdom has been sacrificed for the comfortable illusion that people fundamentally change, when evidence suggests they merely become more sophisticated in their approaches. Your memory of harm is not bitterness, it is intelligence. Your recollection of patterns is not vindictiveness, it is wisdom. Your maintenance of boundaries based on demonstrated character is not cruelty, it is self-respect and the protection of everything valuable you have built in their absence. Let them find other targets whose memory has faded, whose boundaries have weakened, whose protective wisdom has been overwhelmed by the desire to believe in redemption without evidence. Your life, your energy, your trust, and your peace are too valuable to be repeatedly sacrificed on the altar of others' unchanging character patterns. Remember what they did. Remember why you needed distance. Remember the lessons that pain taught you about certain people's consistent nature. In that remembering lies your freedom from cycles that would otherwise repeat until they destroyed everything you have worked to build and become. This is not the closing of your heart, but the opening of your wisdom. Not the end of your capacity for forgiveness, but the beginning of your ability to forgive from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. Not the elimination of second chances, but the establishment of criteria that genuine change must meet before trust can be responsibly renewed. They only come back when you forget what they did. So remember, and in remembering, discover the power to break cycles that would otherwise define the rest of your life.